We finally arrive at the historical overview of some of the important milestones that created the basis for the evolution of diversity and inclusion. And that is on various different levels. It was rarely through time that more than one type of diversity and along with it type of discrimination was addressed. We will only go through some of the important milestones. Not all that happened through history, but you can always do your own extensive research and get to know it a bit more in detail.
We are using the article and the overview of the portal Mevitae as a reference here. The article called Diversity and Inclusion. A look back at the key events over the last 120 years. They listed a lot of milestones throughout history. While we will extract some of those, but we do recommend it for your further readings. And getting to know the history of, we can say, human rights with a focus on diversity and inclusion.
We will start with the Niagara movement that was founded by Du Bois and other black leaders in 1905. And in 1909, they joined white reformers to become the National Association for Advancement of Coloured People. The NACP used federal courts to challenge residential segregation. In 1912, the first London gay club, called Cave of the Golden Calf, was opened and located on Regent Street, one of the famous streets in London, nowadays known as a shopping street.
In 1918, we have the passing of the Eligibility of Women Act, which allowed women to be elected into the Parliament. In the next year, already the Sex Disqualification Removal Act was passed, that among other things stated that a person shall not be disqualified by sex or marriage from the exercise of any public function, or from being appointed to or holding any civil or judicial office or post, or from entering or assuming or carrying on any civil profession or vocation, or for admission to any incorporated society.
In 1920, the Oxford University allowed the admission of women, that is partially one for every 6 men. In the same year, the Blind Person Act was passed, providing a pension allowance for blind persons aged 50, 70. We jump a bit forward into the 1928, when women gained, through the Equal Franchise Act, the right to vote in the UK.
Fast forward in 1936, we have Mark Weston, a British athletic champion, transitioning from male to female. In 1943, what the portal Mevitae calls the origin of diversity, the first modern equal employment legislation, was introduced in Congress, and then 5 years later, President Truman signed the Executive Order 9981 to desegregate the armed services.
In 1944, the Disabled Persons Employment Act was passed, requiring employers with over 20 members of staff to ensure at least 3% of staff were disabled. This is something that is close to what's currently mandatory in today's society.
In 1958, the Homosexual Law Reform Society was founded in the United Kingdom. Following the Wolf-Enden report, we recommend you read about the report as well, to begin a campaign to make homosexuality legal in the UK, thus marking one of the first steps towards inclusion based on sexual orientation.
In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial, which is one of the most famous speeches in general, that called for an end to racism in the United States. Just a year later, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, making employment discrimination due to race, color, sex, religion, or national origin illegal for employers with more than 15 employees. In 1968, we have 850 women machinists at Ford factory in Dagenham that went on strike over the issue of the equal pay.
In the same year, President Johnson signed another Civil Rights Act of 1968, providing equal housing opportunities regardless of race, religion, or national origin. In 1970, the Equal Pay Act was introduced in the UK, prohibiting any less favourable treatment between men and women in terms of pay, and conditions of employment with a similar act introduced in the United States of America years before. In 1963, in the same year, the Gay Liberation Front emerged and LGBT pride began.
In 1979, we have a landmark in Europe and in the world. The UK became the first nation to allow citizens to legally change their sex. In 1979, Margaret Thatcher became the first female Prime Minister in the UK. 19 years after the first female Prime Minister in the world, Siri Mavo-Bandaranaike was elected to lead the government of the Ceylon, today known as Sri Lanka. In 1981, the Shocking Pink Collective was introduced as the groundbreaking feminist magazine that addressed topics like abortion, lesbianism, and violence against women.
In 1987, William Brock, the Secretary of Labour, commissioned a study of economic and demographic trends. This later became the landmark book. Workforce 2000, Work and Workers in the 21st Century, highlighting 5 demographic factors that would impact the US, but also the world labor market. The population and the workforce will grow more slowly than at any time since the 1930s. The average age of the population and the workforce will rise, and the pool of young workers entering the labor market will shrink. More women will enter the workforce. Minorities will be a larger share of the new entrants into the labor force. Legal and illegal immigrants will represent the largest share of the increase in the population and the workforce since World War I.
To bring this almost to an end, we look at some modern-day initiatives, which serve as a good example of progress towards inclusion in our society. In 1992, Mae Jemison became the first African-American woman in space. Throughout the popular 90s, the World Health Organization changed the definition of homosexuality from being a mental health illness. Can you imagine that it took us that long to change the definition of something that nowadays would, at least to most of us, seem so basic?
In 2009, we witnessed the first African-American president in the USA history, Barack Obama. But only 4 years later, we are the witnesses of the Black Lives Matter movement, triggered after the video of the police brutality against an African-American, George Floyd, went viral. In 2014, UK legalized the same-sex marriage. In 2017, changes were made to the Equality Act, making it compulsory for British companies with more than 250 employees to report their gender pay gap figures each year.
The reason we wanted to take this opportunity for a historic overview is to show you how there is an ongoing battle for respect towards diversity and for an inclusive approach towards all groups, no matter the differences on any level. We see that from the early 1900s we had equal payments initiatives, but we do know, on the other side, that this still, to this day, poses a real problem, even though progress is visible on some levels. We see that from the early 1900s we had gay rights initiatives, and then, on the other hand, even though the change started as early as the 1973, not until the 90s was it that the homosexuality wasn't considered a mental disorder by the highest levels of our society. This is only one example where we recognized how we were wrong, the highest levels of our society. This is only one example where we recognized how we were wrong.
We see that we have activities that are focusing to put an end to racism throughout the history, including the Martin Luther King Jr. most famous and one of the strongest speeches in history, "I Have a Dream." But then in the modern day era in 2013, we are witnessing another movement triggered by a shocking event once again to end the racism. The conclusion is the negative aspects and the discrimination in all of its forms are always around us, but to make a positive change, we have to start within ourselves. We have to dig deep and always remind ourselves about some of the core values of the human existence: respect, tolerance, inclusion. History is teaching us. We just have to be smart enough to listen and listen actively and treat others as we would like to be treated.